we're going to do the meeting virtually. So.
Oh, okay.
I agree, though.
I know. Good time saver, but. All right. Item number 3, approval of the February 16th, 2021 EDA minutes. Any comments or questions or changes or additions? And if there are none, I will take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Do I hear a second? I think that was Brian. Oh, Brian Mundell. Thank you. All in favor?
Julie?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Item number 4, the AC Red interview report. And I've been asked to report back on this since I was on one of the interview panels. So the Anoka County Board posted the job opening for Jaquel Heider's recently vacated position for the Anoka County Economic Developer position. And they received several potentially qualified candidates for the position. So Rhonda Sivaraja, who's the Anoka County Administrator, she conducted the interviews and sought assistance for the interview panels from surrounding Anoka County communities and business partners. She wanted a varied geographic representation from various Anoka County communities on the interview panels and trying not to have the panel too large. And she also wanted participation from the Metro North Chamber partner and Connexus Energy. So the first round of the oral exams and the interviews were scheduled for Monday, March 8th, and it required a commitment for most of the day, as there were about 12 individuals to interview, and that was done virtually using WebEx. So in this initial round, Administrator Sivaraja posed questions to each candidate, and the interview panel individually scored the answers to the questions. And at the end of the interviews, the scores were combined to identify the top 3 to 5 candidates. So unfortunately, I was unable to commit that entire day for the initial interview process, and I was placed on the second interview panel for Thursday, March 11th, last week. So the second round of interviews were more informal, where the panel was allowed to ask follow-up questions. So the representatives on that panel included Administrator Sivaraja, Commissioner Scott Schulte, and included myself, Bruce Saylor with Connexus, Lori Higgins with the Metro North Chamber, and Aaron Sherpick from Columbia Heights, the Community Development Director. So that afternoon, we interviewed 3 candidates and 3 finalists. And I did take advantage of the opportunity to ask follow-up questions. So I asked each candidate what type of experience they had in expanding broadband in their existing line of work, and if awarded the position, what potential solutions they might have in expanding broadband in our underserved areas of East Bethel and Anoka County. So I got a good variety of answers. Each candidate was interested in building on the previous work that we had done and expressed a desire to work together to continue to understand what additional steps could be taken. I wanted to plant that seed with them, and I wanted Administrator Sivaraja and Scott Schulte to hear again that this is a very important topic for East Bethel. So I thought the initial interview committee did a really good job of narrowing down the field of candidates. So they had 12, and we interviewed 3. And each of these candidates had their own unique strengths and levels of experience. So I found the decision was somewhat difficult. And there wasn't a formal scoring process. We just had a discussion after the interviews. And at the end, we made some recommendations to the board. And then the understanding was they're going to reach out and offer a position to the preferred candidate this week, with the hopes of trying to get somebody on board as soon as possible, understanding that people need to offer a reasonable amount of notice to their existing employers. So, any questions on the process or questions or observations?
Well, it certainly sounds like we put the right person as volunteer, and to your point about asking those types of questions, I think that was very very astute that you did that, and just to kind of reinforce that whole broadband matter with the county. So thank you, Julie.
Oh, you absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Mayor. I was glad to do it. You have to recognize those opportunities and take them, right?
Absolutely.
I would second.
Julie, was it? Oh, what that was offer an Oka County board? That was going to offer the position.
The interview committee made some recommendations, but yes, the final decision is put to the board.
I wanted to say that I would second Steve's sentiments. Julie, thank you so much for being the lead person.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Did you like some of the candidates that you were exposed to?
I did. It was a tough decision. As I said, each candidate there were varied levels of experience and varied levels of energy, and you're trying to find the right balance between both. And I thought the initial interview committee did a great job at narrowing it down from 12 to 3. So I was pleased, and I would have frankly been comfortable. I had my preferences, but I would have been comfortable with any of the 3. So I thought they did a great job.
Awesome. Good. Thank you.
So hopefully we'll have somebody new in that position. And based on the recommendations, I think it's going to be a really great working relationship with the city of East Bethel. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's just my report. So if there's nothing else on that, we can go to item 5, the internet service plan RFP. And Jack, will you be covering that for us?
I will. Thank you for your report. I appreciate your efforts on that also. The Internet Service Plan. Over the past year, the East Bethel EDA has been discussing the needs for improvements and extension of Internet service in the city. These discussions have primarily flowed through Jaquel Hyder, an Oka County Regional Economic Development, AC RED, as our advisor in the initiation of this process. Ms. Hyder's support and guidance has been invaluable as she resigned her position effective March 1st, 2021. Acknowledging our past reliance on this position as the facilitator for Internet service improvement goals and plans, the city recognizes the need to become more proactive in our role as a driver of this project. To do this would be best achieved by utilizing the services of professional assistance that specializes in this field and in conjunction with continued assistance from AC RED. In addition to the needs of existing business requirements for reliable high-speed internet, this service is critical in the marketing of the city as a viable location for commercial and industrial prospects. The corresponding demand for this service is the increase in the number of residents working from home, the need for continued distance learning, the growth of home occupations, and the surge of personal use of the internet for communications and entertainment that makes this service essential for many city residents. Primary issue with access to internet service in the city is the number of residents that live in low-density areas. The number of homes per mile is a determining factor for the feasibility of service extension and improvements for fiber and cable. Solutions to provisions of and accessibility of internet service will vary with neighborhood density characteristics. There is no one-size-fits-all for the city. A range of alternatives will be needed to be investigated and evaluated to develop the best options for providers to offer this service whether it be hardwired fiber or cable, fiber-fed towers, wireless small cell antennas, or new technology advances in global satellite service. Based on council discussions and recommendations that came from the February 16th, 2021 EDA meeting, City Council directed staff to prepare a request for proposals for an internet service plan at their March 1st, 2021 work meeting. Staff is reaching out to the Blanding Foundation, 80 Voltage, University of Minnesota, U.S. Internet, current internet service providers, AC Red, and Isani County for assistance in developing the RFP and recommendations for contacts for consultant services. The broader components of the RFP would address assessment of the city's broadband and internet infrastructure, the needs and goals for the system, determining the role of the city in the execution of the plan, coordination of the service providers, identifying funding sources for improvements and extensions, describing the scope of the work, defining the project deliverables, the qualifications and references of the consultants, and their costs for this service. In the attachments, I've included a community broadband overview, which was actually presented at EDA approximately a year and a half ago by the Blanding Foundation. It's just an overview of some things that I just mentioned. Also, a list of broadband consultants that specialize in this field, which when we started investigating, there's a lot more of them than I originally thought there may be. A sample RFP, and I also sent out a memo last Friday on a plan that Isani County commissioned back in 2017. It was quite extensive. I don't think we're looking for something as 178-page variety as that is. That just gives you an example of some of the background that we may be looking for. The end product of engaging a professional firm for development of an internet service plan would be the identification of areas that could potentially be served, existing areas that require service upgrades, funding sources, city cost participation, and coordination of the providers to partner their efforts and resources to implement the plan. The RFP would be prepared by staff and submitted to council for approval. There would be no unbudgeted cost for this stage of the process, and preparation for the plan would be an eligible EDA expense should a contract be awarded for the work. Staff is recommending the continued discussion of broadband internet service concerns relating to extension to underserved and unserved areas, as well as improvements to the existing service user. Staff requests additional comment or recommendations from the EDA regarding the development of the plan and any potential suggestions for the development of a request for proposals for this service.
Jack, what would fund sources for improvements? Will that cover any grants and state or federal program that might help?
Yes, that would. The whole funding aspect of this would be looked at in detail, from grants to loan programs to all means of financing, including bonding, city participation. A lot of it would be determined on what level the city wants to commit to this. So the funding source would be a major component of this on what we could tap to utilize. Participation with the service providers to provide assistance to them in serving some areas in the city. And remember too, if we do embark on this, this is something that won't happen overnight. This is going to be kind of a long incremental process. But I think if we're going to make it happen, we're probably going to have to get a little more stake in the game.
Jack, it was interesting when I was doing the candidate interviews, one individual gave an example of their community where they actually received a grant from the Blanding Foundation to actually take on the study. I'm wondering if that's an option.
You know, unfortunately, it probably isn't, because the Blanding Foundation does not operate in the metro area. They were given permission to assist Anoka County back in 2018 or 2019 when this was done, to do 32 hours of consulting services for these North Metro counties that were kind of more similar to the outstate areas that they work in. but they will not be able to assist us, unfortunately.
Good point. This was an outstate area. Okay, thank you.
Jack, one of the things that I'm thinking might be a viable option is now that the state got $6.3 billion in the last American Rescue Plan, maybe there's some state money available for an endeavor like this to help small businesses and individual businesses that are operating out of their homes.
That's a good potential source, Dan, and there may be also some funds available from this latest round of grants directly to cities. It will be coming out. The details will be released here very shortly. We think it'll be somewhat similar to the CARES grant, but there may be a little bit broader use of some of the funds to do infrastructure projects, and this might qualify as one of them. The league's having a webinar on this, I believe, on Wednesday, that we're going to listen into and get the details on, but we think there may be some significant funding coming to the cities through this program.
Jack, do you have a ballpark estimate of what you think this will be?
As far as the cost for the RFP,
Yeah.
I think it's going to probably depend a lot, Steve, on how much we're looking for, but I'm going to say we're probably going to start in the $25,000 range if we're going to get anything that's going to be meaningful.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, again, and we'll go over some of this when we talk about the EDA budget. There should be funds available to cover that from the EDA budget or maybe some of this other funding that we're anticipating on getting. So I think we just want to make sure that we're defining in our deliverables exactly what we need. I don't think we need something as extensive as what Santa County did. I think it does need to be very comprehensive, especially in identifying the needs of those three main areas that we're looking for: is the underserved, the unserved, and what improvements we need to make in areas where we have adequate service. There's still some gaps in some of those places.
Yeah, thanks.
Jack, I have a couple questions. They kind of relate. So the first one is, can you describe a little bit more about what our stake is going to look like? You had mentioned taking a bigger stake in this and relying less upon the AC Red new hire, whoever that might be. What would that look like, and how would that fit in terms of what other communities are doing? Because I understood from what Jaquel was telling us before that this is a kind of a county-wide effort, that many communities are looking at doing this, and we kind of join in that effort. How would that shift with us kind of taking more position in the driver's seat?
Let me answer your second question first, Tom. I think this is something that's not going to be done independently of the county. The county is going to be one of our partners in this. We want to continue to work with them. They're a valuable resource. We're just hoping that their next new director is going to have the energy and the initiative and the interest that Jaquel did. If we get someone that's even close to that, we're going to be in good shape. The whole pattern of this is shifting from what we've been able to find out. And what we've done initially to date is we've sat back and we've talked to Jaquel, and she's arranged some meetings to talk to providers to try to get them interested in expanding service, or to sit down and coordinate their efforts for the city. What we're finding, though, is unless the cities take a little bit of a financial responsibility in this and are willing to provide some money for gap financing, or even do other off-budget things like eliminate fees or certain obstacles that some of these providers may face from an ordinance or a regulatory standpoint, that we're not going to get there as fast as we'd like to. So the question that we'll be discussing again with the EDA, and more so with City Council and the Finance Committee coming up, is what do we want our stake to be? What can we afford? but recognizing the fact that we are probably going to have to chip in a little bit to make this thing happen on a timetable that we're all satisfied with.
Thank you. And I know we've done so much work in this already, and there seems to be a lot of information that we've covered, at least in my time here in the past year. And so in that report you sent from Sandy County, I appreciated that on page 31 and following, they kind of go through customer service, and then later on in the report, they go through business replies and what they thought of it. We have a lot of that information already, don't we? So the consultants, whoever they might be, could utilize a lot of this information that we've already gone through.
That's correct. We do have a lot of information, and we do have the ability to probably dedicate some staff time to do some legwork for some of the stuff to lessen our financial obligation on this. In that report that you mentioned, there's two interesting sections that are well worth reading. And it's the government role section is on page 78, and finance options, which are on page 103. So, you know, that's kind of an overview of what we're kind of looking at. And it's the whole gamut of things. And there's a whole menu of options that we can choose, and we'll just have to choose the one that we think we can afford going forward. I think it's important to note that in that study, they're comparing broadband infrastructure as to what highways were at one time. In the beginning, highways were financed primarily by private interest, but because of their need and importance, there started to be public participation in financing those. So, you know, like I said, one of the things that we're seeing is that's very important is, number one, well, I don't guess there's any really distinction in some of them. Some of our existing businesses need upgrades in their service to be competitive. You know, we need to be able to offer the best high-speed service we can, so we'll be attractive when it comes to competition for new business and industrial locations. Home occupations are expanding, and in order to have a home occupation now, I'm sure that internet is probably one of the prime requirements that you have reliable high-speed service. With the COVID issue hopefully easing, we anticipate that distance learning activities will probably be reduced some, but I think the schools are going to learn some things from this and probably be still offering some of this. In many areas, there are students that don't have access to internet. And then just the whole use of internet for personal communications and entertainment sources are expanding dramatically. So there's definitely going to be an increasing demand for the service. There's also going to be an increasing need for improvements to the quality of what we have too.
I think the designation as a public utility is a logical one. Thank you.
Yeah.
I tend to agree.
It appears to me that neighboring LGUs should be cooperating on this. My voice isn't coming through, evidently.
No. What, Brian? Neighboring what?
It just appears to me that neighboring LGUs, be them in Anoka County, Russ, Oak Grove, St. Francis, and Linwood, and even up into Santee County, we all have a vested stake in having this infrastructure to be improved. It's not something that I see that East Bethel needs to be carrying the water by itself. We're all in the same boat on this situation. I don't know of anyone up here that really has good internet service, in my limited experience.
You know, Brian, I think I agree that broadly, it's we're not going to carry the torch, but really what this is we're just lighting a fire. When it comes down to is getting things moving. You know, of the communities up in our area here, I think it's probably pretty safe to say that we're the ones that have the most immediate need because of the economic growth along the 65 corridor. But the other communities don't have that. They certainly have the same need from a residential use standpoint, but not from the business and the commercial development. And I think what our discussions have been really over the past year is really to get things rolling. And then our latest discussion of doing this RFP to get a consultant on board is a little bit of getting that going, but also showing the county that we're pretty serious about this. Way up in northern Anoka County, so they're not used to doing that. So, but I agree. We shouldn't do it all. But I think this will be one step. So,
don't take my comments to be that we shouldn't be moving forward and doing this. It's more on the lines of, and I realize that we're dealing with personalities and politics in other communities that may not be as progressive as East Bethel is, but we're all in this together, and I would hope that we would get some help in lobbying with the county, with the state, our state senator, our state representative, going to bat for us with the state when it comes to that. My point being, we're all in this, like I said before, we're all in this together, and I don't think anyone wants to just be sitting on the sidelines. I agree, Steve. We have more of a demand with the Highway 65 corridor, but boy, I'll tell you what, in talking with the educators, it's a huge thing for students, and to the point of where in some rural districts they're sending buses out with transponders on them so that the kids can, in northern Mille Lacs County, can log on the internet and be taught, so to speak.
Brian, you identified some very other crucial members or players in this, and that's the political side of it. Need to be talking to our legislators about the importance of it. But again, I think the more regional concept of it is going to come to, again, working through AC Red and let them be the regional driver of this. Maybe a little bit beyond their scope to try to put together a coalition, which could be a difficult situation to do and even hold together. But AC Red has got that experience. They're well ingrained. The St. Francis Group as one of their community development directors, a member of their board. So I think they're on board with it. To show you how much traction this is getting in rural areas, I live in Bradford Township, which is 5 miles west of Isani. I had our township chairman contact me about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he wanted to know how I felt about extension improvements of internet service in Bradford Township. And he said, do you think people would be willing to vote for a bonding bill on it? Now, I don't know how many people in Bradford Township, but to mention the bonding bill is almost heresy. So it's getting traction. It's getting traction everywhere. So it's something that's really important, and it's probably one of the more cutting edge tools of the 21st century as we go forward. Is something we really need to have to be competitive, not only locally, regionally, but even nationally and globally. So.
Right.
But I think one of the key things that we need to keep in mind as we go through this is that we're not abandoning AC Red. In fact, I think we're going to embrace them more and more. And I think, like Steve said, we're showing the county that we're serious and we're committed. If you remember what got this started really in earnest was about 2 years ago when the county identified that technology corridor. And we were omitted from it, but there was a reason. We didn't have anything to offer. So, I think that kind of stirred the fire under us and, showed us, okay, we need to step our game up a little bit to be considered in some of these designations and some of the things that the county is doing and also in who they can refer us to as prospects.
I think some of that's a little bit of the confusion or the complexity that, like in Oka County, we have some of the wealthiest households in the nation and some of the poorest. So it's such a diverse and big area. And so it's easy, I think, for a city perhaps like ours even to get lost. And I think that, it's a bit of a challenge for us to figure out how to make them embrace us and make sure that we stay in there and to let them know our needs and to try to embrace these needs and figure out how we meet them. I have neighbors down the street from me that have high-speed internet, and people on my street are clamoring for it, and we can see those houses and we can't seem to get it. So, and I know we've all, or a bunch of us have tried to reach out and say, what would it cost to bring it to my house? And it's incredible, the numbers we've gotten. But I think people just don't realize how close we are to those other homes. And so I think it's a matter of just kind of spawning or figuring out how, one connection connects another and how we just get it going to start to bring up the access up 65.
Well, and I think that's a major thing we're looking for in this is to identify those areas that have the densities that can be served immediately and that are contiguous to existing service. And, point those out and coordinate with the providers to illustrate to them, that there are potential extensions that can be marketable here and make a profit. In addition to this, we're also renegotiating our TV cable contract with Midco. That's one of the things that we'll be talking to them about is requiring extension to those areas that have 25 homes per mile and are contiguous to existing service. Because with cable, TV extension is probably going to come internet service. So you're doing both one, so you might as well do both. So that's one of the things we're going to try to focus on too, Catherine.
Thank you.
And I guess, and I know it's there was quite a bit of information sent out, but if anybody has time to look over that draft RFP, I will say that the Blanding Foundation did furnish that. Mr. Coleman was very generous in submitting quite a bit of material to me. But he said, they couldn't do any work for us. But if you see anything in an RFP that you would like as a deliverable, let's discuss it. Because I'd like to get a goal to get something approved by council, maybe first meeting in May, and get that sent out so we can see what we can do, and then we'll get some prices on what the cost is, and then we'll have to determine which way to go from there.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Agree. So I'm just looking at the recommendations. Okay, so additional comment or recommendations from the EDA. Do you feel it necessary to form a task force for this, or or if just everybody on the EDA at this point, and perhaps, I don't know if you're asking council, but if we all reach out with our particular recommendations, does that seem to satisfy the input you're looking for?
I think it would if you have some things, please let us know. We want to incorporate and look at all this information so we can develop something that's going to touch all the bases and interests that we're looking for and getting a response to see what we can come up with some kind of a plan.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Do we need a motion on this, Jack?
We do. Well,
no, this is kind of an information item. I think I've gotten direction from you, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Jack?
Yes.
How soon do you need comments back?
I'd like to have them back within 2 weeks. I'd like to go over anything that we have at the April EDA meeting so we can finalize this thing to get before council at the first meeting in May.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
So if you jot your thoughts down, call me, or just wait till the next EDA meeting and we can discuss any things that you'd like to see on there and see if they're applicable.
Sounds good. All right. So if we're ready, we can move on to agenda item number 6.
I'm sorry, Julie.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make one correction to agenda item number 6 before we start.
Okay.
There is a typo in there. It's in the 4th paragraph under fiscal impact. It says the proposed 2022 EDA budget is $126,200,000. Obviously, the last comma should have been a period. So it's $126,200. I thought we had our problem solved there for a minute.
Yeah. Whoa. Let's go crazy, right?
That's correct. All right. Agenda item 6.0 is the 2022 EDA levy review and recommendation. The Economic Development Authority and City Council are required to approve and submit a preliminary levy to Anoka County by September 30th of every year for the city EDA budget. The EDA approved a levy of $121,200 for 2021. An off-levy revenue amount of $5,000 was collected by the EDA from the special assessment on the revolving loan fund established by City Council in 2013. This loan account was created for the 11 businesses in the Classic Commercial Park for sack and whack loan payments required by their mandatory utility system connections. As the payoff of the special assessment has now been completed, it is proposed that the EDA consider approval of minimum levy of $126,200 for 2022. The EDA balance as of February 28th, 2021 was a negative $33,958. This balance reflects the $126,200 transfer that was made to the general fund in January 2021. The city will receive the 2021 levy settlement amounts in installments from the county in July and December for the EDA. These payments will make this account whole and the total approximately $88,000 at year's end if there are no additional expenditures during the year. As indicated above, the 2022 EDA budget is proposed to be a minimum of $126,200. This amount would be used to support the executive director, community development director, finance director, and administrative support for EDA-related work, EDA projects, and marketing and business assistance needs. The maximum statutory levy that can be adopted by the EDA is 0.01813% of the previous year's estimated market value of all property in the city. In 2020, the total market valuation of all property in East Bethel was $1,326,806,200, which could produce a maximum levy of $242,806.54. In order to address the needs of EDA projects, particularly those that relate to internet service, the EDA may wish to discuss recommending an increase in the levy amount over the minimum budget proposal for 2022. Staff recommends that the East Bethel EDA recommend a minimum 2022 budget levy of $126,200 to City Council or additional amounts to accommodate internet or other capital economic development projects. And as a for instance in this, a $5,000 increase would be 4% over last year's budget, $10,000 would be 7.9%, $15,000 would be 11.9%. We take budgeting very seriously and especially recommend increases very seriously. If the EDA wishes to go above the recommended minimum level, which would keep us at the same funding as last year, this will be presented to our finance committee, which will meet in approximately 2 weeks. They'll start the budget review and then make recommendations to City Council.
Jack, do we know if we're going to have costs for internet project that we would need a budget for, that we should add money for, or is this just a what if?
Well, this is not only for internet; it'd be for other capital projects. Like if we don't have any other expenditures by the end of the year, and there may be a few, but they would be very, very insignificant expenditures. We don't we don't know what Midco is gonna do this year, but let's say we had $10,000.
Sure.
We would have probably $75,000 to $78,000, which would cover this consultant cost. But if we're gonna have skin in the game for internet projects, and we're gonna have to do maybe some gap financing or cover some things for certain extension projects, this is a good place to start with that. So if we have some funding available in the EDA account to help expedite and facilitate these projects, it would certainly be a very good way of looking at providing some funds to make sure certain projects happen. Again, it's going to be an overall discussion with the overall budget. I know everybody on the EDA is concerned about the overall budget, but this is just kind of focusing on this one. And the Finance Committee will work that in to see how it can be reflected in what the recommendations are for the total 2022 budget for the city.
So what kind of over and above funding would make a difference? Would 4,000 make a difference? Would we want 10,000, 25?
If I were just going for a recommendation, it's going to be, I think this is going to have to be incremental steps. I think $10,000 would be a legitimate request to be considered. Not that it would be approved, but I think it's legitimate to be considered. The 126,200 really just accounts for inflation, so it would be level with what last year's was. So if we're going to get involved in some of this stuff, we're going to need some additional funds. I don't think we can ask for it all at one time, but we might want to take the incremental approach, just as we'll probably use that in doing the extension of internet service. So I think we'll be able to start. We've tried to do that with the HRA, and we've done that for the last several years. Actually, the EDA budget has remained almost flat for the last 3 years. We did have a reduction one year, so this is kind of catching us up maybe on where we should be.
Okay, so you're saying incremental, so you're saying at one point 10,000 over this would be great, but if we do half that at one point, then we're on our way. Is that what you're saying?
You broke up a little bit. If I heard you right, Brian, you're asking me if I recommend a $10,000 increase in the minimum recommendation. Is that correct?
You said there would be you're looking for a possible incremental increase. And so if we're looking at a 10,000 bullseye, would we be looking to say if it's at 126, we just bumped it up to 130, and then year after that another 135?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look at it on a year-by-year basis. And if we recommend this to the Finance Committee, the Finance Committee will place this in relationship to the whole budget, and they may say 10,000 is too much before we make a recommendation on the council for the development of the preliminary budget. But $10,000 is a starting point, and it's a lot easier to come down than to go up on these things.
Okay, I guess based on that, I'd make a motion to increase the minimum 2022 budget levy to 136,200.
Any comments or discussion?
Was there a second?
Questions? Or do we hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Well, I think we got discussion yet here.
Oh, we have discussion, okay.
The way I look at it, we kind of see EDA, from the EDA perspective, we kind of see these projects that may come up as early as next year. But I think the challenge we have is we are kind of projecting the future here, and we haven't even looked at this yet. So I think we gotta be a little careful there. I would kind of view it as we know that we're going to have projects in the future along these lines, and we want to start this with some seed money, just so we start this fund. And so I'm not so sure if it should be, Jack, and we can discuss this at the finance committee, but is whether it's part of the annual budget for the EDA, or if there's a separate fund that's set up, for this kind of thing. I think we can work that out at finance committee. But
that's another approach to use, is just to set up some type of fund like we currently have for almost like
the gravel road fund, right?
Enterprise fund, but it'd be like our equipment replacement fund, street capital funds, things of that nature.
Yeah. So it's I suspect it'll be a challenge to get through council, but so I think when this is presented, we just got to make sure there's a strong enough case for it. So.
Jack, this goes in front of finance first, doesn't it?
I don't think we have enough information at this point to even make a consideration. We're talking about anything from $5,000 to a study that might cost $25,000, and so I just try to pinpoint that as a recommendation of the finance committee for a change in budget or whatever. I would think that possibly a recommendation of the finance committee would be a minimum levy of the 126 and change versus trying to pinpoint what this additional cost or additional skin in the game would be. It just doesn't seem quite possible for us to even nail that down. It seems to me the ADF voltage consulting project was a $27,000 downstroke, if I recall back correctly. But maybe I'm off on my numbers, but I know it was over 10. So I'm sure this consulting project cost more than $10,000.
No, you're correct, Dan. I think the 80 voltage study actually is closer to 40 when it was done.
Well, there was a follow-up that cost 13, but the initial study I think was 27,000.
But the 25,000 I'm using is just a starting point, and we want to get that to where we're getting the information we need and not any extraneous information that we can develop ourselves. So. And again, the $10,000 is not trying to pinpoint this cost. The cost for this RFP, if it's so desired to go down that route, would be paid from existing EDA funds that we currently already have or will have by the end of December. We'll get our first half tax settlement 1st of July, and that negative balance will then shift from a negative 33,000 to somewhere around a positive 27,000, and then we'll get the next settlement in December, which will bring that up to about 88. And there are several accounts that do run in the negative until we get our tax settlement, so this isn't unusual, but we would have the money from 2021 funds in the EDA budget for the study. What I'm saying is going forward is, do we need to consider increasing EDA budget for anticipated future? And the number has to be looked at in terms of what the overall budget is. This is just kind of a starting point, and we can start at 0, 5. The number at this point is just to kind of give a baseline for the finance committee and the city council to use that in the development of the preliminary budget.
Yeah, I think there's a couple benefits of doing it. One is getting that fund started, because say a project comes up 2 years now, say there's no project next year, it's budgeted, it's not used, but a project comes in and it's 20 grand, in 2023. It's a lot easier to acquire funds in smaller amounts than it is to do one lump sum. So what I'm saying is, we start this fund, and we may not use it, but at least we have it going, so it's a less of a hit on the city levy. The other aspect of it is, and should go unseen, not unseen, but it's the fact that it's showing that EDA and then city council is committed to this too, by putting some money away that we know we will be making some investments in the future. So, I think personally, I think it's good that EDA has this. I agree with the motion. I'm a little hesitant on it, but it's a motion so the finance committee can start working on this and then make the presentation to council. So as Jack said, we can always back down. It's harder to increase things as we go. So
yeah, if you ask for 10, you might get 5. If you ask for 5, you might get 2.
Yeah. And then to note that 3 to 4 finance committee members are on this call right now, so it makes that a little easier. So.
Well, my question would be, if we suggest raise the amount to 136 and change, do we also make the recommendation to the finance committee to put a line item in the budget that $10,000 of this increase is to be considered a line item budget towards expansion and development of the internet and broadband services in the city?
I definitely agree with that.
I'm with that too. And is it possible to even amend the motion saying that if another fund might be found, that we could allocate that money from that fund rather than from the EDA levy?
Motion can be amended to add that line that the 10,000 over 126 would be allocated just for the internet project or some sort of line item like that.
It just makes sense to have capital improvement money set aside. And, you know, that rather than having to pull it all out of a 1-year budget. So I think $10,000 is a reasonable amount.
I would just add one more thing, and I think as the EDA budget goes, I think it's also important to consider flexibility. It may be that next year we've got this, but there's other needs for it, for gap financing, for some type of other incentive to get a business to locate. If we limit it just to this one particular item, we may come up short in some other areas. That's always a concern, but I can see the purpose too of putting it in a line item. Just keep in mind that we need to have some flexibility in the use of these funds.
I'll make a motion to amend the motion to designate that the additional $10,000 above the 126,200 is future broad to be determined in the future.
Can you repeat that? Cut out a little at the end.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend that the $10,000 of your motion is dedicated into a separate fund for future broadband projects.
I'll second.
Okay. Any final comment? Otherwise, we can go to a roll.
All right, to the amended motion made by Mayor Voss, and the amended motion was to approve the minimum $126,200 EDA levy and an additional $10,000 to be dedicated to broadband projects. To that motion, Julie?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Ryan? Mundell?
Aye.
Ron Bezanson?
Aye.
That motion passes. Now to the original motion of the approval of the minimum recommended levy of $126,200 made by Councilman Mundell. Julie?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Brian Mundell,
For clarification, is that 126,200 plus the 10,000 with the line item?
that's 126,200 plus the line item. The original motion was 126,200.
Plus 10. Okay. Aye.
Brian Bezanson,
Aye.
that motion passes. So we will probably be notifying the finance committee of a date by the end of this month, and that will be part of our presentation to them. I think that's a good step, and we're on the right foot with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. So we'll go to agenda item 7, the business activity report.
I'm not going to go down through these item by item. Some of them are just ongoing and continuing things. There's 3 of them that have some current updates that I will provide. The first one is the Highway 65 Bikey Boulevard reduced conflict intersection update. I'm just going to give some highlights on this. Mayor Voss may wish to comment on it after I'm finished or during his council report. But the city met with MnDOT on March the 1st to review 2 items. The first one was the Klondike Highway 65 reduced conflict intersection project. That project will commence sometime in April and have an approximately 90-day completion date and be finished sometime mid-July, 1st of August. The other item we discussed were some improvements, mainly safety improvements, at the Bikey Boulevard Highway 65 reduced conflict intersection. MnDOT did hire an outside consulting firm to look at some issues there. They made several recommendations, and they are going to implement some of those fairly soon. I'll leave any details or additional comments on that for Steve. The second one is the aggressive hydraulics project. The city's been working very closely with aggressive hydraulics. Paul Johnson had been working with the county on getting some DEED grants, but with Jaquel's resignation, we stepped in to fill the shoes with that. We made contacts with DEED, and DEED has a program called a Joint Jobs Creation Fund, and we developed a fact sheet for them for aggressive hydraulics, submitted it to them, talked to their people, and they're very interested in this project, and they have scheduled a meeting with Mr. Johnson to review it, so there may be some funds available there for him. He's getting very concerned with the price of materials rising and how it's going to affect the timing of his project. We also worked with Mr. Johnson in his eligible costs for his TIF application, and we got qualified cost increase from $87,000 to $200,000. I might add too that TIF district for the original one for aggressive hydraulics was paid off in full in December and has now been decertified. And as a result of that decertification, there's $30,000 left in the administrative account in that program. That can be dispersed in 2 ways. One way is that the city can use $17,000 of that for administrative costs going forward and use the remainder of any balances for any improvement projects within that district, which would mean little road projects, water and sewer projects. Administrative costs on that annually, though, were about $3,000, so we didn't do much really quickly. It would evaporate quite fast. Or there's another option where we can return the $30,000 to the county, and then the county disperses that on an equal proportion to the city, the county, and the school district. So in our analysis that we've run, and we'll have this discussion at the council meeting next Monday, it's kind of going to be a toss-up. If we had a project we could do, it'd be best to take the $17,000. If we didn't, it'd probably be best to take the $12,000. So again, we've been working with Mr. Johnson quite extensively, and he's got some additional financing options for his project. So I haven't heard his report back from his meeting with Dee, but hopefully it was productive and will be the stimulus for him to get started on this. The other thing I want to mention is the Elevage project. The city at long last received approval from MnDOT of all our plans and specifications. We were given approval to bid the project. The project was advertised on it's in the paper this week. The bid opening will be April the 2nd. The project bids will be presented to City Council on April 12th for hopefully a bid that we can approve and authorize construction on. The city is working in parallel and ahead of the bid opening on a couple of items. If anybody was on Bikey Boulevard today, they know it's quite a bit of tree cutting. We're doing the tree removal in advance of the bid opening because there's a March 31st deadline that has to be completed because of issues with the long-tailed bat habitat disruption. So we took bids on that, and we're currently doing the tree removal in the street easement right away. It's about 7 acres. That may be done by this Friday, so we'll have that completed and out of the way, and keep your fingers crossed on the bids. That's all I have for the project update.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Any questions on anything else that was listed in the report for information purposes? If not, we'll move on to item 8, the city council report.
Yes, Jack covered a couple of items that I was going to bring up, but with the Elevage project, everyone should have noticed that the Suburban Propane former facility is now gone. That lot's cleared, and that's part of the road project that will go through there. And then, Jack, if I remember right, what Stephanie said, that we're going to see proposed site plans from Quick Trip within the next month or so.
That's correct.
So that'll be coming in. So the rumors we've all been hearing for 2 years are coming a little more to fruition there. So on the MnDOT meeting that we had, it was a very productive meeting. The county was involved. MnDOT's consultant was involved. The consultant's done a pretty thorough independent review of the intersection and identified many of the problems that the city, the county, and everyone realized with that signalized RCI. They are and they came with a few alternatives, and their next step now is they're putting costs to those alternatives. And then this group is going to reconvene in the next few weeks to discuss that and see where MnDOT thinks this is going to go. But they're working on it. If anyone's driven through the intersection last month or so, the state's greatly improved the signal timing, particularly going east-west on Viking. You no longer have to wait for 3 lights most of the time. So they're making improvements. It's incremental, but it's nice to see them moving forward. One of the things that was on the list of projects that Jack didn't call out for was the city council approved the preliminary and final plat for a lot in the classic commercial park. The lot was previously an outlot just south of Aggressive Hydraulics. And I think, Jack, that's the Panel Gold distribution center. That's going to be coming in there. So that was council approved that. Council also approved changes to our codes with zoning, specifically to the mixed use zoning as part of a new comp plan. Essentially, it's swapping out what was city center before and now calling it mixed use. A second aspect of that code change was going to be changing residential zoning, particularly around Coon Lake. That has been tabled to make some more refinements on that. But those changes are all meant to help residents with all the various challenges that are around, particularly around the small lots around the lake. The Midco franchise agreement, we've retained the city attorney to assist us on that. So that process is starting, and it's going to be interesting to have that go side, kind of hand in hand with this whole broadband discussion. So it's we'll be having discussions with Midco, and they'll be focused on the internet aspect of it, although that's not technically part of the franchise agreement. So, but it is something that they're aware of, that everyone's interested in. The last thing council did, or perhaps didn't do, was at our last meeting, the final plat for a small development in Whispering Aspen was brought before council. This preliminary plat is a cul-de-sac with 6 lots on it. It was approved by planning at the preliminary plat. City council approved it 5-0. When it came, and council approved it with some conditions, those conditions were met, and it came through for final plat, and it failed to pass council on a 2-2 vote with Councilmember Mundo abstaining just because of his ties with the applicant. As long as I've been involved in the city, Brian, you've been there so long, I don't know if we've ever turned down a final plat like this when the developer meets all the requirements. The reasons the 2 council members stated, one was that the widths of the road didn't match up, and that there was a concern over snow storage because of the cul-de-sac, and both of which were addressed by staff. But with both council members, as with Councilmember Urkel and Councilmember Beck that voted against passage, they're both concerned the fact that there's too many lots in this subdivision. And kind of the key part of that is that this was ghost platted back in 2004, and it's part of the PUD, and it's part of the agreement that the city made with Firebird Development, the developer of the land. And so everything's under contract, and the concerns that both Councilmember Beck and Councilmember Urkel were that there are too many lots and they're not following city code. And it was discussed at planning this way, explained to planning, and also explained to council that they do not need to follow city code. That's what a PUD allows, is a whole set of standards. And so it was a very challenging discussion. And the hard part about it is that we're actually required by state law to approve the final plat. And so by this vote, we're bucking against state law. And what really kind of gets to me, and I think EDA will have perspective on this too, is for as long as I've been in the city and involved in the city, we've always had to have, I think, an unfair reputation of that we're not business friendly. And I think all the EDA members and staff, particularly over the last 10 years, we've been anything but. We've been very supportive business community. But unfortunately, this is a vote that goes right in the face of that. And it's very frustrating. So we don't know where this is going to end up. We'll have a discussion at council again next week, I imagine. So, Jack, does that kind of cover it? You want to add anything to that?
I'll add this to Steve's report. The city's left now with 3 options. The proposal will be to introduce a motion to amend the vote from the last meeting and send that. Absent approval of that, the city is required to approve the plat if all conditions are met and no findings of fact are presented that prove otherwise. If that option is taken, the city can go ahead and certify the plat and sign it. If that option is decided not to be exercised, then the applicant can apply to the circuit court, and the circuit court will invoke the state statute involved in this and require the city to approve the final plat. So, as Steve said, it boils down to the fact that there is really no discussion about approval because the 60-day rule is going to go into effect, which brings the other two requirements into place. And the original motion was not voted for because of proper presentations by the two dissenting voters.
I would strongly advise that the council members who voted against it have a private conversation with the city attorney.
We've actually attempted that. And I don't think there was any discussions. So.
No.
Have fun, Steve. Wow.
Yeah, it's.
I like it.
This is something that's a rubber stamp. It should be. And council approved the preliminary plat 5-0 back in was it November? It was November.
Yeah, I should add I was not on council voting on that at the time.
I picked up. I know that, Brian. Wow.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Julie.
Thank you. All right, ending with that, if we have nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jack, do you need to take roll call?
Yeah, we better do it that way. Julie?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Brian Bundle?
Aye.
Brian Bezanson?
Aye.
Motion passes.
We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
night.
all.
Good
Good
night.
conversations. Thanks.
Thank you.
Out. Jack. Brian, you still there?
Oh, am I?
Yeah, you're still there. Did you get my chat messages?
The what?
Are you on your phone?